Well, welcome to the workshop for finding primary resources in Native American, American Indian, Indigenous studies. Here on out, I'll just call it Indigenous Studies to make it simple. My name is Brent Singleton. I'm the liaison to the Ethnic Studies Department on campus. So I have worked with these resources quite a bit, at least the platforms, if not the content in every database. So just to start out with, I like to cover what is a primary resource, just so that everybody's on the same page. Primary resources are firsthand accounts. So these can be documents or artifacts from the era, including letters, speeches, even things like coins, architecture, etc. Um, and so I've shown here a list of all kinds of things. It's not exhaustive, but there's all kinds of things that fall under the example of primary resources, depending on what your subject is and exactly what your research is. Um, so there are some things that come after the fact, like oral histories and memoirs, as long as they were firsthand accounts of somebody who was from the event or during the era, then they would still be a primary resource. Righty. Um, So how do you get to this material? So from the library homepage, what you do is you would click on choose a database. And there's a lot of categories here, but there's a category for ethnic studies. And then underneath that, there are some ethnic groups listed. So I'm going to click on the Native American and American Indian Indigenous Studies link. And then we have all these databases or collections of various primary resources. Now, I'm only going to cover 4 today, but you can see there's more than that here. Um, so what I'm basically going to do is cover 4 primary resource collections, each one of these being a collection, on 4 different content providers or platforms. So what is a content provider? The easiest way to think about it is in our current world is streaming services. So you have like your Hulu, your Netflix, your Disney Plus, what have you. Well, our database content platforms are similar so that they all have a different look and a different feel. They all have different content, right? So one streaming service might have a movie and another one doesn't. Same thing here. Even though these are all primary resources for Indigenous communities, they're all covering different things. They have different documents, different kinds of things in them, right? So I always encourage people to read the little summaries here for each database so that they know exactly what's covered in there. So for example, this first one here, American Indians in the American West from 1908 to 1971, is very restricted to a particular time and place, right? So it's from the early 19th century through 1971. So if you were doing something on a topic that was from the 17th century or 16th century, this isn't going to work. Or if you're looking something on the, let's say a tribal group on the East Coast, that's not going to work because this is talking about the American West. There may sometimes be some crossover, but this is not the database you'd want to be in if you were looking at a peoples from on the East Coast or even in the Midwest for the Eastern Midwest, your Ohio's and so forth. So there's this particular collection. Also, thing to read the accounts here is so that you know exactly what's covered in the terms of the perspective. So this particular database has a lot of government material in there. So a lot of this is coming from the Bureau of Indian Affairs and other resources from the National Archives. So a lot of this doesn't necessarily have a lot of indigenous voices. There will be some, and there will be some that were indigenous voices that have been through a filter. So like somebody wrote down an account of what somebody may have said, but it's not directly from the indigenous folks. So you always have to keep that in perspective as well while you're looking at these descriptions that maybe the perspective I'm getting in this database isn't exactly what I want. Having said that, let me go ahead and click on American Indians and American West. This database is on the platform called ProQuest. So just like my analogy before, this would be like, let's say Netflix. It has its own look and feel. Every database we click on today is going to have a search box right at the top. But let's say you're not sure exactly what you wanted to search on, or you wanted to know more about what is in this particular collection. You could drop down and you see these browse features here. So we have these collections within a collection. So this overall collection about American Indians and American West is kind of a collection idea, but within that collection, there's specific collections like stuff in the Department of Columbia, Department of New Mexico, Department of Oregon. So some geographically specific collections. If we move down a little bit further, you also see certain things like particular campaign, or in this case, the Indian removal to the west during this period. So it's a good way to sort of explore the collections within this platform. So let's go ahead and click on Indian removal to the west. And another interesting thing about some of these databases is that if they are archival collections, like this one is from NARA, the National Archives and Records Administration, they have retained the archival arrangement, meaning at the archives as it exists in Washington, they have boxes, and within those boxes there are folders, and within those folders there are documents, and they've retained that so that you can see the exact order as if you had gone to NARA and looked at these items yourself. So let's go ahead and click on this first one, which are letters received by the Commissary General. And so when we click on that, these are the order of the documents that are in those folders. And first of all, in the box, and then within the folders of the box. So this would be the first item in that box and in the first folder. And when you click on it, you can see here that these are markings that would have been on the actual folder at NARA. So they retain everything. It's just like you were there on site. And then you start seeing the actual correspondence. So this is helpful if you're a professor and you want your students to learn how archival arrangement works, or if you want to sort of reconstruct that sense of being in an archive so that your students can get used to it online before they go to an actual an archive. If you're a student, same thing. You can see how archives work, generally how the materials are going to look within the archives themselves, right? Let's back out a little, back to the I want to go to the full front page here. So we clicked at the featured collections, but there's also a timeline. So this is a chronological look at the sort of topics that are available. So it starts in this case in 1830, and you go down, and let's say you see something like this. Oh, the Modoc War. That's what I'm interested in. I can go ahead and click on that, and you can see there's 109 items, and they're across these decades here. So there's nothing before 1870s because the actual war occurred in 1872. So you see in 1870 there's a lot of documents, but in succeeding decades there's also some coverage of the Modoc War. So if I'm interested in things from the exact time frame of the war, I would click here in the 1870s. And from these 109, there's 64 that are from the 1870s, and there are some documents that you can see here were in years outside of 1872. So they're like sort of reflecting on what occurred or finding more testimony, what have you. If I only want stuff from 1872, I can click even further and drill down to the specific date. So now I'm only dealing with stuff from 1872, the year of the war, and you can see now I'm down to 52 results. So it cut it about in half. So half of the items were from that year. And so you can go ahead and see these things. Okay, this one looks interesting. I can click on that. And then I can start seeing documents. See, once again, you can see the folder arrangement. They even scan in the folder that this was in. In this case, we're in the records of the Indian Division, Office of the Secretary of the Interior. So this is a slightly different collection than when we were in the other one about the Indian removal. But you see, you quickly get past the folder into the actual documents. But these were the order that they would appear in the document if you went to this records of the Indian Division. Okay, so that's pretty cool. But let's say you came to this database and you already were completely sure of what you wanted to search on. You didn't need to look by chronology. You didn't need to look in what collection were available. Let's say you were looking something specifically for the San Manuel group, the nearby group. We could say San Manuel. I'm putting it in quotes so that I get an exact phrase search on it. And go ahead and hit search. And there's 21 items that have the phrase San Manuel in it. And you can see there's one correspondence relating to California, so that's more than likely to be about our group, right? So we could go ahead and say, okay, well, let's go ahead and click on that. Full text of that. Once again, you have that folder arrangement, and we quickly get into the documents. Now, there are 28 pages of documents here, and I have no idea which page mentions San Manuel. They might all mention it or only one time. And some it could be on page 25. Unfortunately, because these are in cursive, these are basically, these are the original scanned in document. There's no way to search it within the database. Although we searched the database itself to find this, once I'm in the document, I can't do any searching. If I try to do like Control F here and do San Manuel, what it's doing is searching outside of the documents. So it's finding it in the actually browser here. It's not looking in here. So unfortunately, with these scanned in like documents that are in cursive, you kind of have to just read through them till you find what you want. So it's a limitation of the database. Okay. Let's go back out to the results and let's scroll down a little bit. So this one says expenditures on irrigation projects on Indian reservations. Okay, let's say we are interested in that. Now this one is a published document. See, it looks like it's been printed, right? It looks like a book. So in this case, it's a 6-page sort of pamphlet that talks about expenditures on water, irrigation projects on Indian reservations. But because this is a printed item, I can do the Control F. As long as I click into the document and do Control F, I can see where my item is. Let me run it again. Usually it's highlighted. Oh, there it is. So you can see here, right here, you can see San Manuel. So it's mentioned there once, and then you can click on it again, go to the previous mention of it. So if it's a printed item like this, where it looks like it's like sort of like basically like a book, something that was on a printing press, you can search them using Control F as long as you click on the document first. If you don't, it's going to search out here outside of the document. But if you click on the document, hit Control F, you can search these ones. But when they're in cursive, scanned in letters, it's not going to work, unfortunately. Okay, so let's say I found this item, I'm interested in it, and I want to keep it. What do I do? So you see your some save options up here. So I could download this item here. Go ahead and click PDF. It downloads it really quickly. And I can go into my download folder, and here it is. So this is no longer in the browser. This is clicked on a PDF file that I had just downloaded. Okay. I could also print this item, but if you click on all options, you can see there's even other things you can do, right? So there's other kinds of, doing the text only, doing it as a Microsoft Word document, saving it to the cloud. So there's all these other options that are kind of hidden unless you click on the all options option. But normally you can just do download here or print here and you're fine. If we wanted to cite this item, they do have a handy dandy citation option here. When I click on this, and let's say I'm a history person and I want to use Chicago, which is usually what history uses, I can go in here, change it to Chicago, and then here's my citation. Now, there's often inaccuracies in these generated citations. So as you see here, it says check the accuracy. So you still want to look at the Chicago manual or some, Purdue OWL or even our own page that talks about Chicago style and make sure that it's fully correct, the capitalization is correct, and everything's correct. But it is a quick and easy way to grab this information. You just hit copy here, put it into your, and then paste it into your document. Okay. So that's the American Indians of the American West. I'm going to go back to, close that down, go back to the list of databases and try a different one. So let's try Indigenous Peoples of North America, Part 1 and 2. Once again, I would say to read this here. So basically, there's several centuries of manuscripts, images, books, newspapers from both the U.S. and Canada, right? Because our border is arbitrary when it comes to like the Plains Indians and some of the northern groups on the border. They cross those borders. They always have crossed those borders. So this database is often are North America, not specific to the U.S., although this one was. Most of these are U.S. and Canadian. So this one has a lot of government sources in it, but it also does have some distinct indigenous voices as well. So we were just in ProQuest, now we're in Gale, so it looks different. So once again, that's like going from Netflix to Hulu, using my analogy of streaming services. So we're in Gale now, and it operates a little different. We have the search box, which we'll use in a moment. But if we wanted to explore like we did in the other database where we were looking at like, the content of the various collections and chronologies and so forth, their version of that is here under collections. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And these are the collections within the collection. So the collection overall is the Indigenous Peoples of North America, but there's 53 sub-collections within there that cover all these different things. We have photograph collections, we have stuff about Indian schools and what have you. So let's say we clicked on this Charles Steve William Merton Hart papers. Um, just like when we were in the ProQuest database a moment ago, this database often retains the archival order as well. So this one's coming from Wichita State University Library, and this is their manuscript box and folder level, just like we saw before. So if I click in there, this would be just like if I went to that archive in Kansas, pulled off that that folder from the first box, and this would be the first item in there. And you could just go through page by page, just like you were on site at the archive. Okay, so let's go back to the collections. Let me go back one level here. So let's go down a little bit further. And I can see here that there's an Indigenous Peoples Newspapers sub-collection. Now there is interesting because now I know I'm dealing with actual Indigenous people's perspective. I'm not getting the filter through some government agent who went out in the field and wrote some stuff up and said what people said. These are the actual voices of Indigenous peoples. Now there's no archival arrangement here. These are just the newspapers listed, the ones that they have listed. Just there's not a lot of them. There's, maybe 20, 25, but these are the ones that they are, you're able to search in. So I could search within this collection. So I'm just searching within the newspapers. If I went up here, I'd be searching in the whole entire database, but this is just in Indigenous Peoples newspapers. I can search here under, like, let's say sovereignty. So say I was interested in the idea of sovereignty. I can search on that. I get 247 hits, and these are all newspaper articles. So here's Prime Minister Trudeau rejects absolute sovereignty. So this is the Prime Minister Trudeau, not the current Prime Minister, but his father from the 80s. And here's the newspaper article that talks about sovereignty. Our two terms are highlighted, so I know where they're at in this particular article. Actually, 3 times it's mentioned in there. Okay, so I don't have to search in here. I know exactly where the terms I'm interested in are listed. So that would be from the Indigenous point of view, right? That's very important when you're getting multiple perspectives. You definitely want to have the Indigenous point of view, while some of the other ones may or may not. Okay. Now, if I jump back to the front page of the entire collection, Indigenous Peoples in North America, I can do that same search. Oops. Same search, but now I'm not searching just the 200 newspapers, or it was actually only like 20 newspapers, sorry. I'm not searching those newspapers, I'm searching the entire database. So I see those 273 newspaper articles that we got in the other, when we were in that sub-collection, but there's also 1,100 manuscripts, 230 books. So I can go into these other items and find things that are not newspapers, that are also primary resources, like this Yavapai Prescott result here. And I can see this is a letter from, looks like maybe a lawyer or something. And here's my terms mentioned in this letter. That was from the to the Association on American Indian Affairs. Okay. So you have other items when you're searching the actual full database content. You're going to get things beyond just the newspapers when I was in that sub collection. Now, what do I do in this database if I want to save something? Well, our save options in this case are across the top here. In the ProQuest, remember there was like 3 dots and we can get a whole lot more different options, but in this case we get these 3 options. So I can email it. Oftentimes when you email, keep in mind that it's not going to email the actual document, it will email like the citation. So that is a limitation. So if you want to make sure you have the document, you definitely want to download it or print it. So if we hit download, I can download the entire document or pick pages that I want, and then I can hit download, and now I have this thing. This is, once again, this is mine that I've, it's not from the browser anymore or from that database. This is what I've downloaded. So I'll close that down, and then we could also print it. Okay, so it's very simple. 2 options there, your best 2 options to either download it or print it. Okay, they have that same handy dandy cite feature here, also noted by the quote marks. Works similarly But in this case, we can change it to Chicago here. And then we can, once again, you're going to want to check these, right? There's a little disclaimer here, and it probably says, make sure you check this. It does, because there's all kinds of problems that could possibly crop up. Sometimes the disclaimer is actually shown, but this time you have to click on it. But it is saying that, we're trying our best and, this is handy, but, you want to make sure you check to make sure everything's right. Okay. So that's Indigenous Peoples of North America under the Gale Primary Resources Platform. So we have a few more Indigenous voices in this one than we were seeing in the first one. So, okay, we're making progress. So I'm going to go back to the main database list and try North American Indian thought and culture. So it's a totally different database, totally different platform, totally different provider. This one has books, oral history, some audio, once again from US and Canada. So once again, you're having a different mix of resources, and they're totally different from what the other collections would be, right? Because these are pulling from different archives, different libraries. They're not going and digitizing the same stuff over and over again and then just putting it on a different platform. So this one's Alexander Street. So to use my analogy, over and over again, this would be like going to Disney Plus now, right? It looks different. We got different stuff going on. As always, there is a search box here, which we'll get to in a moment. Their version of browsing is quite extensive. They have a bunch of different ways you can browse. So if I go under like historical events, this is going to be the chronological view. So it starts with Columbus's first voyage, and then I can go down and it gets closer and closer to our time. So then I can say, okay, here's something from the 1813 Creek Indian War, and then they have some subsections that you might want to look at. So that's your chronological look at it by clicking on historical events. There's also the idea of people. Do I know I want to look for a particular person I'm interested in? You can try to see if we have any documents with particular people. So in this case, like Kate Bighead, and I can click on that, and it says, okay, so she was a witness to Custer's last battle. So now I have, and it's 8 pages long. So let's say I was interested in that particular person, Kate Bighead, I was quickly and easily got to her through this list of peoples. But one of the more interesting ones to me is content types. When we're trying to ferret out which ones are going to have Indigenous voices versus other folks, they're all primary resources, but they might be from, once again, from a government agent's perspective or what have you. If I go to content types, I have a little bit better chance of finding things that might be from the Indigenous point of view, like looking at interviews, speeches, oral histories. These are likely to be from that Indigenous perspective. So for instance, if I click on speech and address, I can see there's all kinds of, even though there's a microphone here, these are not audio. These are actually printed transcripts. But I can see stuff like this, message of the chief of the Muskogees. So that seems like it's the chief coming from that Indian perspective, an Indigenous perspective. In this case, this particular chief of the Muskogees. And so here's the actual text of this. Oh, it's an 11-page document. Okay, so it's kind of interesting. They scan the front like book page of the cover of this, but then the rest of the book is like in text. It's not scanned in. So this database chose to do that, which is actually helpful for us because it makes searching it easier. So now I can search over here and I can look for let's say the word immediate, and I can see okay, there it is. It's listed there, and I can get to it real quick. So we saw in the earlier databases, sometimes searching was a little bit tricky or impossible. In this case, it's real simple and easy because this is just text. It's not like the original printed. It's not an image. And the one thing they've done is they've kept the pagination, which is very important because if I'm going to cite this correctly, I want to make sure that I can cite the correct page. So even though it's not scanned in and we can't tell what page it is because it's not printed, they have added it so that we can cite, let's say we were getting a quote from page 6 here, that we would know it was on page 6. Okay. So this one is interesting from that standpoint, right? We could go to, actually go up here. So when we wanted to output this item here, let's say this is what we were interested in. Once again, we could email it, but I don't think email is going to email the actual text. It's usually going to be like the citation to it or something. So we're like, well, how do we output this thing? Well, we can go under more here and see that there's some print and download options, okay? Okay, great. So I'm going to hit download here like we've been doing in the other databases. And go ahead and hit save there. And now when I click on this, there's nothing there. It's only saved like the citation information of this thing. And that's just a peculiarity of this database. So what would I do if I want to save this thing? I don't want to print it out because I need, let's say I want to be able to search it later or do something with it. You could still use, even though the download doesn't work properly, it just gives you the title page essentially. If we click print, right? And then say, and I want Chicago style for the citation, and then go to print. I have an option here where, actually, I wanted to do it. Actually, I take that back. I wanted to use this print here, not under here. Under here, it's just going to give you the citation again. I want to use this little icon here, little printer icon. I can choose the entire document or choose particular selections. I'm going to hit print, but I don't really want to print this. But what it gives me the option, and I can see the whole thing's there, right? This is what I would be printing if I decided to print it. But the first thing it says is save as PDF. So you can actually print to a PDF and basically de facto download it. So I can hit save here and I can go ahead and save it. And instead of printing to my printer, even though it says it's printing, it's actually printing to a PDF file. And it will go into my my downloads file. So it doesn't pop in my browser like the other ones were when I was hitting download, because it goes to your actual downloads file in this case I'm using Windows, so it would be down here in at the bottom tray where it says where your Windows folder is. But it will save it and it will be downloaded, even though I had to use the print option to do that. So it's kind of weird, but anytime you run across something that you can't actually download for some reason or another, you can always hit print and save as a PDF or print to a PDF. It's kind of weird, but that's a workaround. Okay. Now this one also has the site citation with the quote marks. That seems to be the standards these days, just using the quote marks. And Chicago B, here it is. Copy and paste it, put it in my my Word document or wherever I'm using it with. Once again, as usual, always check for accuracy because it may not be accurate for some reason or another. Oftentimes, it's capitalization is where your problem runs into. So that's North American Indian thought and culture. So once again, it's a totally different set of kinds of things. There's a lot more books in here than in some of the other databases. Some of the other ones have a different mix of kinds of materials. So once again, that's why you're going to want to look at these descriptions to really figure out which one you want to start with. Okay. Now, I have one more database I want to show. I'm showing it last. I skipped it. I'm showing it last because it's a very challenging database. Okay, it's called Indigenous Newspapers in North America. So it's great. It has all of this content for almost 200 years from indigenous communities in the US and Canada, but it has the least functionality. It's very clunky, often slow, but the content is very important, right? Because you get 200 years. Remember in the other sub collection, we had like 20 newspapers we were searching. Well, this is hundreds of newspapers we're searching. And it's across a much broader time frame, 200 years. So it's a very important database, but it has its weird limitations, which you'll see when we use it now. So it has no way of searching for topics like we've seen in every other database. There's no chronology like we've seen in other databases. There's only really the search option. The one thing it does have is newspaper profile. So if you wanted to see which newspapers were covered, you can go in here and it will give you a little information about the actual little history about that particular newspaper. So it is useful. But that's about all you can do other than search in this database, right? Let me get back to the beginning. So we're really restricted to knowing what we want to search on in here. We can't really browse to see like what topics are available or anything like that. So let's say we're doing just a really general search on artists. So we're looking for an indigenous artist. We're just exploring now, so we don't care what a particular one at this point. We're just kind of seeing what's out there. So this is where your patience is needed. It's slow and it will take a moment. So we have 7,500 some odd articles that mention the word artist. So let's say we look at this one, Indian artist Bill Rabbit, blah, 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 from 1987. Sounds interesting. Let's go ahead and click on that. And we wait. So this is sort of that clunky slowness that I was talking about. But if you're patient, it works out. You know, you've got to be zen about it, but it will pop up eventually. Okay. So now that it's up here, here's my article, Indian artist Bill Rabbit, and it continues up here. So it gives you two columns. So this part here is not about the artist I'm interested in, but it highlights basically the columns where your article is mentioned. So down here is not important to me, and up here is not important, but this part and this part are. Now, when you're searching in this database, there is the option of an advanced search. So it does give you a little bit more than just throwing in terms into the words. You can do certain things. Like, let's say remember I looked at that list of newspapers that were available. Let's say I saw one that I was interested in. I could search just the one particular newspaper. So I can put the newspaper title here and then start searching here for what my topic is within that newspaper. I could also say, I don't know what newspaper I want, but I want things from New Mexico. So I can go to publication location, put in New Mexico here, and then start searching. So those are helpful to sort of hone down a little bit. They do have this proximity idea here. What proximity does is it allows you to make your terms be close to one another. So if I put 5 here, the idea is that my terms would appear within 5. So if I said artist Cherokee and put proximity 5, that means that artist and Cherokee would have to be within 5 words of one another. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to work. I've tried it several times and I always get the same result no matter if I use this or not. So it doesn't work in this database. So I would just ignore this even though you see it there. So your options really are choosing one of these fields to search or doing like we did at the beginning and just chuck in keywords, in our case, artist. Get back to where we were. Okay. So let's say this article is great. I want to download it or do something with it. What do I do? And you're going over here and you go, no, that's Zoom. Oh, no, that takes me home. Oh, this does this. There doesn't seem to be any save options. If I right click, I have copy image, save image, so that might work. But really where it's hiding is here under this little caret here. If I click on that, now I can see download image. That's where it was hiding. I mean, like I said, I could have right clicked on it, but this is where I would do it. I click download, just like we've done in the other databases. And you can see right away that it downloaded the entire page, not the article I was interested in. That might not be a problem for you. It's pretty easy to identify where your article is and you can just call it a day. But if you needed just that article, this is a little frustrating that you ended up with the entire page and you have no means to, manipulate it and make it just the part that you want. And there's no way around that in this. Well, I'm using Chrome right now. While I'm using Chrome, I can't do anything about it. But I'm going to jump over into Firefox real quick and show you a workaround. So I'm going to go to the database, choose a database, Native American, and we're in the Indigenous newspapers, North America. I'm going to do a slightly different search. I'm going to say, let's look at Morongo. Hit go. So up to this point, exactly the same as what we were doing before, looking for articles. Morongo call for water system change, 1976. That's interesting. Let me click on that. And we wait. Yeah, that's just part of the deal with this database. But it will come up. You just have to sort of close your eyes and meditate, and maybe when you open them, it'll be there for you. So here it comes. So to this point, it looks different, just as similar as what we saw when we were in Chrome, right? It has our article highlighted here. Now, if I go up here and hit download like we did when we were in Chrome, I'm still going to get just the entire page. But what Firefox has an option is if I get on this part here of the page and then I right click, I have the option to take screenshot. And now I can choose what I want to output. and now I can download just that, copy it or download just that bit. And let me reshare something because it actually doesn't go to the browser. It goes to actually oops, hold on. Let me open it. Let me go back to here. Oops, where am I? Back to the Chrome. I want to go back to here. Okay, sorry about that. So let me resave that again. Take the screenshot, go to here, download, and I'll click on the download. And let's see what we got. It's taking its own sweet time. Okay, so what I'm gonna have to do is share. What it did was it shared it to an image, in this case, my image viewer. So this is where I can manipulate this further if I wanted. I can make it bigger, I can crop it further. So it opened up another application in from Microsoft Word. It chose which one it was, but it's there and you can see that it was downloaded. And now I could save this, I could edit it, save it, and keep it exactly as I wanted it. Just the part I wanted. Oops. Let me go back here and go here. Okay. And so that's how you can get around the clunkiness of this database. There is also no citation option here. So in this case, you're just going to have to write down the information where you got it from and cite it like you were, do it by hand. So it's a little clunkier. It's the only database that doesn't have it that we've shown so far. So it does have those limitations, which is a little frustrating and unfortunate. So that's what I wanted to show you all. I'm going to stop the recording.